Welcome to a special edition of Globe Watch with me, Charles Ebune. Are you a Pentecostal minister? If yes, possibly you are legitimate to say we are in the end times as described in the biblical book of Revelation. The chaos, the confusion, and the anarchy rocking the world today due to the corona outbreak legitimately gives you a reason to reason in that perspective. But first, the science and the medical exposure of the facts concerning corona, which has rocked roughly 160 countries in the world today. Emergencies declared amongst nations. For example, the United States of America. Countries completely closed down. Airports, schools simply locked. And of course, the scene seems to be a one of panic. Where are the facts about corona, which of course has caused a global constellation? My guest today is Professor Wilfred Mbacham. He is one of Cameroon's best leading biomedical scientists, and few years ago, roughly in 2017, was awarded the best promoter of medicine and research in sub-Saharan Africa by the World Academy of Science. Professor Wilfred Mbacham, welcome to Globe Watch.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
The last tally from the World Health Organization puts roughly plus 180,000 people infected globally of the coronavirus, with plus 7,000 deaths, the highest number in a single country, of course, coming from China. This is not the first time we have the coronavirus. Why is this one so deadly?
Okay. I think the first time we had the coronavirus was in 2002, in November, when they noticed that there was a new kind of pneumonia that was attacking people from the Guangdong province in China. And by 2003 March, the World Health Organization had put out an alert to warn people coming from these areas of a kind of infection that they had not seen that was causing an atypical pneumonia. And then followed that was the CDC that described it as
the Center for Disease Control in the US.
Yes, in the US. That described it as a severe acute respiratory syndrome. And it got the name SARS, to which was attached CoV for coronavirus. And by the time that they started to contain, it was 4 months later when they started uplifting the bans, the travel bans from Southeast Asia. But then there's still some bans on certain animal species which they found could contain the virus. And when the World Health Organization had tallied it in December of 2003, then they realized that there were about 29 countries that had been touched by this virus, and the death rates at that time were about 10 individuals out of 100 who were infected, so it was quite high. But now we're seeing a mutation of that virus, and it has spread faster than the first virus had spread. And so the world is at odds on exactly how to contain it, because some of the measures and some of the ways in which we have spread it, it's by our own poor habits.
Why is this one so deadly and so fast?
Well, it's not as deadly as the first. If you look at the numbers now, the death, the case fatality rate is still at around 3%. The former one was at about 9.6, or about 10%. And this one is not as deadly, but it has touched more individuals. And therefore, if you look by way of numbers, then it has outweighed what the former one had. And there are many reasons why this virus is spreading so fast. I think one of those is that, it came at a time when the season was appropriate. And there was a lot of travel. And if you look at most of the cases in different places where it has occurred, you would notice that it's done by importation or people who have traveled to these areas. And so by the time they go back to their countries, they would have transported these diseases, or people who travel to other countries would take it into these other countries.
Medical experience proves that the first appearance of corona was in the 1960s. We applaud 7 billion people in the world today. Millennials like myself constitute a majority of the people. But if you look at the statistics carefully, the most vulnerable, those who are dying, are the plus 50 generation, the sexagenarians, the octogenarians, the septuagenarians, people like you. Why? Medically?
Well, because as you age, your enzymes no longer become effective. And so the body, even though it mounts its own kind of immunity, it's not effective in mounting a lasting immunity. And also those who are a little bit aged have other conditions which sometimes are chronic. And therefore, by the time some other stress adds up to those medical conditions, then they quickly degenerate. And so you get it quite severe in the aged individuals.
There has been a lot of blame game on the causes, on the origin, or who has to take the blame for the spread of coronavirus. President Donald Trump just called it the Chinese virus, a statement which has been rejected by China. What is the biomedical truth about the existence of the disease called corona?
Well, I think that nobody should be blamed actually for the spread of this. A number of factors came into place. Very true that, you know, once the infection hits a particular country, people should rally their efforts, called on all the forces and all sectors of the scientists or responders who can effectively provide some answers and quickly contain the infection. Some people, is it a scientific failure? I don't think so, because this is the only time that most politicians listen to scientists when there's pandemonium and they're looking for answers. Is it due to globalization? In a way, yes, because then people have traveled, and it is because of these great travels that you find that the infection then
I am putting the question of the blame game to you because there are lots of conspiracy theories, whether it is man-made, whether it is a biological warfare, whether it is a strategy to contain other economies which were already emerging. My question comes back scientifically. Where is corona coming from?
Well, I think corona is coming from a natural infection that mutated, and I don't think that it's a biological weapon. I equally don't think that people should lay the blame again on one way or the other. The reason being that when things mutate, they can take new forms. And it's been 17 years that researchers have been trying to get a vaccine. I understand that some people have made considerable progress in Germany towards getting a vaccine that may go into trial in 2020. But I don't think that people should actually blame any other person for doing that. I think it's just a question of how we exercise or operationalize selective containment. And I think that most of the nations around the world, and quite lately Africa, has stepped up to do this selective
I understand
containment.
through research found that this is an all mammals affair. It comes from animals. Which are the potential carriers of the disease in terms of animals?
Okay, so basically at the very beginning they said the pangolin was at the origin of it, but we also know that the bats also carriers of these and other viral infections. And we, in our training of viral hunters at the Biotechnology Center, we have been able to detect quite a number of other viral infections in bats, and sometimes camels, and sometimes other cat-like mammals would take on these infections and then be able to transmit. And so by the time snakes, for example, eat the bats, and by the time cats eat the snakes, then you get all these passages. And during these passages, it depends on the size of the inoculum. The more the viruses are present in these animals, the more likely they will be selected with mutations that can ultimately be transmitted into humans.
Let's talk about the climate of coronavirus. You know that malaria, which you are one of the best leading scientists, is housed in Africa if we look at the history of the disease, just like Ebola and other tropical diseases. Where are the fertile environments for corona, and what are the most advisable methods to ward its expansion?
Well, I think the fertile grounds are quite many. And if you're asking me the question, if I may rephrase it. Geographically, I think it's difficult to say because we've seen it outspread throughout the world. Africa has not been hit because there haven't been so many travels in Africa. But you could tell that other Africans also have had the infection. And so basically, by reason of its geography, it's hard to say where a virus can emerge from, but there are many conditions in which can allow a virus to quickly multiply.
Well, I'm putting these questions because there has been a lot of fake news and confusions which are spread everywhere. It cannot survive in Africa, the temperatures are too high. It can only survive in Europe where the temperatures are too low. So what are the climatics of corona?
Again, it's difficult to say. Why I say so is because originally they said warm, hot climates would not allow the virus to survive. But recent information said that if it's hot and humid, then it allows the virus also to survive. So it's still too early for us to jump to a conclusion where this could actually, what climatic conditions could actually favor. It is difficult to say at this point in time whether a hot climate would kill the virus, and I think that is an assumption which should not be propagated because it could lead to even further spread, because people would say, hey, after all, the climate is hot and therefore I'm kind of protected. No, we're not.
Countries like France, Italy, the Vatican are completely locked down. A country like the United States of America has declared a state of emergency. In political science, if we were in the medical field, we simply say the patient is in a coma. That is what a state of emergency simply means in political science. Do you clearly understand the backlash over whether science failure is responsible for this? The answers are not coming quickly. Whether globalization is responsible for this, or whether reduced investment in medical research is responsible.
I think that countries need to step up their preparedness. This is not the first. It's not going to be the last. And there are many conditions around that favor the outbreak of any particular virus. And I think that now that there's more available technology, countries should step up their fight and their preparedness for any viral outbreak. And therefore, this investment in time is important because not only do you need to invest in infrastructure, you need also to invest in the personnel. And I think this is just going to be a coordinated response all around the world.
Are there going to be future outbreaks where are there other diseases more deadly than this?
Yes, there are other viruses that scare me more than the corona. For example, the Lassa fever virus. It's just next door. The case fatality rate is about 20%.
Next door?
Next door, meaning that they've seen outbreaks in Nigeria, and there are about 720 cases that have been spotted there with 144 deaths. That makes on average between 2019 and 2020 about 20% case fatality. That's something we should be concerned about because it's a hemorrhagic fever. And when the symptoms occur, you don't know until within 2 weeks. Once they manifest, people then die.
The Lassa fever you just indicated, why do you think that, which is even more deadly than coronavirus, why do you think that it has a lesser global panic spectrum than the one we have?
Well, I think because Nigeria has tried to contain it, and they are so active on the bench and on the field trying to contain it, and that's why it's not spreading as much as it is. And I think that the Nigerian Center for Disease Control has done a wonderful job in containment. They have rallied scientists. They know every time there's a virus outbreak, they can tell you precisely where the virus might have come from because they see genetic fingerprints, and then because of that, they have put systems in place that are able to contain the spread of the virus. That's why we're not hearing very much, but it's very much in the limelight for us scientists who read the literature and who find out what these cases are around the world.
Professor Wilfred Mbacham, nearly part of your entire life is spent in the laboratory doing research, teaching, doing medical advocacy and science advocacy in the world. When a disease like corona comes in, forcing borders, flights, everything, cancellation, and the first response you hear from governments, because the economic tissue is completely overturned, is that, well, the British government says we are going to inject roughly 300 billion pounds to subsidize the industries or possibly nationalize them that are going to suffer from the chaos of the disease. You hear the Federal Reserve, the American government, saying that we are going to inject roughly $5 trillion to support companies that are in difficulty, and virtually you hear nothing on medical research investment. Are you frustrated as somebody of the science world to hear just kind of providing solutions to consequences and not a solution to the cause?
Well, frustrated, I wouldn't say. Concerned, yes. In the sense that I think it's when we have outbreaks like this that the science world is giving some attention. I'm not frustrated in the sense that the money that you hear than trying to put out to save some of the industries. Some of it would also be geared towards research. And this morning I saw quite a number of advertisements asking that people who could provide rapid responses to this pandemic could come up with proposals. And I think that this is opening up also to the science community. And we scientists need to do a better job in how we ask for this funding. We need our institutions to support us so that we can also levy claims to some of this money that is being put out. So I'm not frustrated because there are things that are priority for the state. And if you send all the money, for example, to the scientists and the entire economic fabric collapses, then you're not doing any good job. This virus, 17 years later, has come back in another form. So we have to set up the structures right now to be able to preempt any other upsurge of a virus of similar nature or others that may prop up.
You are very much aware that roughly 300 million children are out of school globally because of the coronavirus. The global aviation leader, IATA, simply says roughly $113 billion will be lost by the industry because of flight cancellation. Some companies will simply be nationalized. All of these chaotic scenes are happening. The United Nations Economic Commission for Africa already says the continent is losing $65 billion in trade, with the GDP expected to down move or nosedive from 3% to roughly 1%. Are the current containment policies meeting the medical realities on the field? Are you satisfied with them?
Well, I think you're talking about two things.
Yeah.
First, there's the economy, and secondly, there's the health realities. I think that what we're trying, the scientific community is advising most governments to do, and sometimes it seems so radical, is that the peak of the infection shouldn't be so steep. If it is very steep, it weighs down on the health systems. And so there's been this promotion of what they call herd immunity, which is trying to flatten the peak so that as many more people get it, they can manage the condition, and so that the entire population can, in a way, be immunized. Once they do that, any other viral infection that gets into an individual will be contained, because then you can no longer transmit it because of that. And so when you see some of the economic measures of lockdown, it's so to establish the first response measure to establish this herd immunity such that a lot of people now can get the infection. Sometimes all of us can have an infection. Not everybody comes down with a severe disease. And so while some people get a mild disease and some people don't get the disease at all, although they're exposed, what the scientific community is advising them to do is that the inoculum size should be brought lower so that they can establish a herd immunity, and with this herd immunity, we'll be able to contain the spread of the infection.
What are the best practical measures for prevention, for example?
Okay, so to establish this herd immunity, the first thing people should know is that they should wash their hands very frequently. Soap deals with this virus like nobody's business. People should also have hand sanitizers. They should avoid salutations or greetings by contact. At the same time, they should also avoid large crowds, and they should learn some new habits, hygiene habits, of knowing how to cough. Sometimes they say cough into your sleeves. Where the University of Yaoundé assembled anthropologists which said this was not the best of ways, especially for Africa. The best way is to have some tissue. Once you cough or sneeze into this tissue, then discard of it, and just wash your hands frequently. And I think this would be able to contain. A large crowding should be avoided, because then by reason of sneezing, you can have this transmitted. By reason of coughing, you can have this transmitted. And I think that those very practical measures are what we're seeing. I was so pleased yesterday that all around the University of Yaoundé 1, we could see wash hand bins and basins everywhere. I took a practical demonstration in front of my students by washing my hands, and we're setting up as many wash hand basins as possible around campus. And I think just with that, it's going to reduce the inoculum size, and therefore people who get the infection will not be that dramatically ill, and subsequently with that herd immunity, the prevention will be contained.
Before heading for the interview, roughly 160 countries in the world are already affected. You are part of the biomedical center of the University of Yaoundé 1, of course, which you share. Any input from this to solve the problem in Cameroon in particular?
Well, I think we are meeting to see that the best measures are taken. The Biotechnology Center has been at the forefront of training viral hunters in collaboration with Lanavet, Yaoundé branch, and also in collaboration with Meta Biota, who are also viral hunters. And we have been able to train these students. We've called up a meeting to be able to see what should be our own coordinated response and provide the government with the adequate measures that it requires.
Finally, if you were the chief medical advisor of any government in the world, based on your medical experience, based on your teaching experience, based on your pathological medical research, what will be the advice you provide to the government to have a kind of preemptive or preventive long-term strategy in curbing or foreseeing occurrences like this?
Well, the first is that I think that there needs to be a team of viral hunters who should be on the alert. And with the technologies available, with the reagents available, some of which we may have to manufacture ourselves on the spot. And I think in response to this, the university, with sponsorship from abroad, has set up a production center in biotechnology, which should be able to generate some of these very basic reagents and be able to put it out to the population so that they can use. I think this preparedness is essential. We're lucky in the sense that the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States is setting up a number of laboratories across Africa, and Cameroon is one of those benefiting. And these laboratories would now be at the forefront of being on the alert. The government also needs to put up and encourage and give us the latitude to be able to feel comfortable alongside scientists all around the world in what we provide as solutions. I was happy that you approached us to have this interview. We give these interviews elsewhere. We encourage people on new and better diagnostic methods than what is currently being used. We do that elsewhere, but we cannot do it for our country. So I think that it's a plus for me to be able to air these kinds of views and to be able to encourage and coordinate teams of researchers under our able leadership at the Biotechnology Center so that Cameroon can have also a very coordinated response.
Professor Wilfred Mbacham, normally we're supposed to shake hands, but I will not do that based on government instructions and the World Health Organization. Thank you very much indeed for being guest on the program.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and I hope that we're able to contain this virus, and that Cameroon, through its Prime Minister and Head of State, have put out one of the best coordinated responses. And I hope that people should not ascribe this to any other thing than a normal natural infection that is spreading. And I think that the coordinated response is one that will take roots, and is one that we should practice in all facets of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.